Rather confusingly, you have quit the government, saying you don't approve of this policy that we could allow an extension to Article 50, delaying Brexit from the 29th of March. But at the same time, you said you're willing to vote for the government's policy on Brexit. Is this the first time a minister has resigned to vote for the government?
Well, I think you have to look at the events that are now emerging. What's happened this week is that Parliament has effectively taken direct control of this decision, and I want to be free, therefore, to participate in this critical debate at this critical juncture. But look, more importantly, I think it is incredibly dangerous to get into a position where Parliament now has the power to command that the Prime Minister, at the 11th hour, go out to the European Union, cap in hand, to beg for an extension, because they will literally be able to hold us to ransom and to dictate the terms of that extension. And I think that would be incredibly dangerous, a final humiliation for our country. What would we do, for instance, if the European Union said that they would only consider a long extension of at least 2 years? What would we do if they said there's going to be a huge financial charge for the right to have that extension? Parliament would be left in a terrible position with just days to go.
And yet you think that the Prime Minister is likely to go ahead with this. Now, apparently you're the Minister when you spoke to the Prime Minister among another group of ministers concerned about what was going on. The Prime Minister replied to you, I don't just do what Ollie Robbins tells me to do. He, of course, being her Brexit advisor, is taking a key role in negotiations. Is it your understanding that this is what is going to happen?
I think you have to look at what's likely here. And the truth is that last time her withdrawal agreement was put to Parliament, it failed very badly with a huge majority against, the biggest defeat in history. I will support her deal, as I did last time, because I would prefer us to have an orderly Brexit, and I would prefer Brexit to happen than not happen, and there's a danger that it won't, in my view, unless we get an agreement. But, you know, at the end of the day, there's no majority in Parliament for no deal, so Parliament would vote against there being no deal, and Parliament would then order the Prime Minister to seek an extension. And I think that would end in a terrible humiliation for our country.
But not just a humiliation for our country, probably a humiliation for the Prime Minister and indeed the government, because at the end of the day, there are many Leave voters who believe that this withdrawal agreement, many Tory MPs on your side and Labour MPs as well, consider this withdrawal agreement, unless it was massively changed in terms of the backstop, is a worse situation than being in the EU. Right now, we have the right to invoke Article 50 to unilaterally leave after 2 years. If we sign up to this withdrawal agreement as it stands at the current time, we basically have the EU having the upper hand over us. They could prevent us from leaving for years and years to come. Many people would say no deal is much better than that, and you shouldn't actually be voting for the Prime Minister's withdrawal agreement at all.
Well, I've made clear in my letter of resignation that as a country, we really should contemplate doing no deal. You have to have the courage to walk through the door and do this. You can't hold a successful Brexit negotiation if you're on your hands and knees and effectively ruling out even leaving without an agreement. You know, the EU have behaved terribly, in my view, during these negotiations. They've not behaved honourably. They've deliberately strung things out, made things longer and more delayed and protracted than they needed to be. They've said in terms that they won't even negotiate the terms of a future partnership until after we've left. And if that's the case, we've got to have the courage to say, you know what, we will take our freedom first and talk to you afterwards. And that's what I will be advocating if her agreement does not go through.
When did you first think that you would actually have to resign? You've been a long-serving minister in that department. You've been deputy to Michael Gove, again, another staunch Brexiteer who has decided to back the withdrawal agreement and back the Theresa May's negotiations. Many in the government who are on Brexit side have resigned over the years. David Davis, Dominic Raab, and Boris Johnson and others. Why have you stayed around? Presumably you had faith that the Prime Minister was going to deliver Brexit. So is it only this issue over delaying Brexit that has changed, or do you think the Prime Minister has been stringing us all along all this time?
Well, look, the truth is that every minister has an individual threshold of how much they're willing to tolerate in collective responsibility. And as I said in my letter, I stuck with the government through a series of rather undignified retreats. I wasn't necessarily comfortable with all of them, but you always have that question as a minister. Can you achieve more by staying on board and trying to shape events than by leaving? And to date, I've taken the view that we should try to stick together as a government to get this done. But things changed this week quite dramatically because the government is no longer in control of the agenda. Parliament has taken direct control. And that being the case, the arguments, frankly, for staying part of the government have diminished. And I just think I want to be able to have the freedom in these final few weeks that we have in this important debate to be able to try and shape events.
Well, as a minister who's been closely involved in the negotiations and the planning, what's going to happen, particularly regarding our agricultural industry and the like, how aware are you of what's been going on in terms of no deal planning? Because we're constantly told we're just not able to have a no deal Brexit because we haven't planned, we're not prepared. It'll be absolute chaos. People are going to die, shortage of medicines. We won't be able to get fresh food and the like. Where are we in terms of no deal planning? Would that be feasible as far as you are aware?
Well, I have been very directly involved in the no deal planning, and the truth is it's not true to say that we're not ready. The civil service have done huge amounts of preparation to ensure that we can manage no deal. I think it would be okay. We know, for instance, that the European Union in a wide range of areas are already effectively seeking an informal transition period of 9 months. And that's to say, in a lot of areas, they're saying we're not going to do anything for the first 9 months. We're going to leave things as they are. They're not ready either to do border inspections, frankly. We would be, but we're not even going to. But they've already indicated that effectively they're seeking a 9-month transition. But it does, Julia, come down to this. At the end of the day, the difference between what they call the worst case scenario of things going horribly wrong and a reasonable scenario where actually things have a little bit of turbulence but broadly carry on as before, really comes down to this, and it's how would the EU behave? Would they behave in a sensible, pragmatic, proportionate way, in which case everything will be okay, or will they behave effectively like a pariah state on our door, in which case, yes, things will be tricky. But, at least we'd know where we stand.
And just finally, the 14th minister to resign. The Prime Minister seems to be very anxious that a bunch of cabinet ministers who on the Remain side don't leave her government, including the likes of Philip Hammond, David Gauke, Greg Clark and Amber Rudd. But she seems to be remarkably unbothered by Brexit secretaries, Brexit ministers and other ministers like yourself deciding to leave her government. Does that tell us where her real loyalties lie?
I'm not sure that's fair in that, to be blunt, she didn't want me to resign and wasn't that relaxed about me doing so. So I think, though, there is a difference, which is people like me on the Brexit side of this debate, frankly, we don't believe in going around threatening to resign and trying to buffet the Prime Minister around through threats of resignation. That's no way to behave as a minister, in my view. The right thing to do is privately, quietly from within to make your case and offer your counsel to the Prime Minister, accept that sometimes it won't be followed. But if you get to a position where you can no longer stay part of a government, well, then you just resign. So you don't threaten to resign and talk about it in the papers. When you can't do any more, you should just go. And that is why more Brexit people have resigned than Remain people. It's perhaps a psychological difference of approach to these issues.